The Vigilance slid through the void, its hull nearly invisible against the backdrop of distant stars, a silent shadow among galaxies. Captain Elias Thorne stood on the bridge, staring into the vast, dark expanse. For a brief moment, he felt the weight of silence press upon him. It wasn't the kind of quiet one found in the vacuum of space. It was the quiet of something far more dangerous. They were alone. Or, at least, that's how it appeared. "Sir," Lieutenant Erin's voice broke the stillness. She was standing beside Thorne, her gaze fixed on the communication panel in front of them. "We've intercepted a transmission. It's encrypted." Thorne glanced over, his eyes narrowing. The encryption was advanced, designed to mask its origins. He took a deep breath, shifting his weight, and then nodded. "Put it through." The panel hummed, and soon a distorted voice crackled from the speakers. "To all vessels in the perimeter. A new anomaly detected near coordinates 5329x. Proceed with caution." No response from the previous probe. "Requesting immediate confirmation of status, repeating." The transmission cut off abruptly, the last word dissolving into static. Thorne's gaze shifted from the screen to the stars beyond the viewport. He could feel a cold tension building in his chest. This was no ordinary anomaly. He knew it all too well. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice steady but tight, "what's the location?" Erin hesitated for a moment, her fingers moving quickly over the console. "Coordinates match a previously uncharted region. It's within the sector we were told to avoid, Captain." Thorne's lips tightened into a thin line. They had been warned about this place, a sector of space far from known routes, a sector where records from Earth had gone silent, almost as though it had been intentionally erased from galactic memory. Earth, the cradle of humanity, a legend in the eyes of most. And yet, here they were, still hunting for answers. "Take us to the coordinates," Thorne ordered, already feeling the gravity of the situation. His crew was trained for conflict, but this was something else. "Sir," Erin hesitated, glancing at her screen again. "There's more. The anomaly, it's not a natural formation. It's too deliberate." Thorne's eyes flickered with recognition. His pulse quickened. Deliberate. That word had its own weight, its own meaning. He didn't need to ask any more questions. This wasn't a random blip on a map. It was something intentional, something human. "Helm, plot a course," Thorne said, his voice firm. "Prepare to move in at full stealth. We can't afford to tip anyone off." The hum of the engines responded in kind. A low growl that seemed to echo in the bones of everyone on board. The Vigilance began its slow drift toward the coordinates, its stealth systems cloaking it from any unwanted attention. As they neared the anomaly, the ship's sensors began to pick up strange readings. Unusual energy signatures. Too old, too powerful to be anything the Council had ever encountered. Something buried, waiting, and now disturbed. "Captain," Erin spoke again, her voice cutting through the tense air. "I'm getting traces of a fleet. No, not just one. Multiple fleets. Ancient ones. They're not showing on any standard charts, but the tech, it's human." Thorne's mind raced. It couldn't be. Humanity had been wiped from the stars, their fleets destroyed in an event so catastrophic that even the most powerful civilizations had believed the story to be myth. The remnants of Earth's glory were lost, erased from history. But now it was clear. The Council had been mistaken. They had ignored the warnings, believing humanity's extinction to be a fable. "Lieutenant," Thorne said, his voice growing colder, "what do you mean by human tech?" Erin hesitated, her fingers frozen over the console. She turned to him, her face pale. "The readings match something only Earth's forces would have used. The weapons, the propulsion systems, it's all old tech, Captain. From the time before Earth vanished." Thorne's mind whirled as the implications hit him like a punch to the gut. This was no simple encounter. This was a revelation. A forgotten empire, lying dormant for centuries, now awake. "Sir, what should we do?" Erin asked, her voice soft but laced with concern. Thorn looked out of the viewport once more, his mind calculating rapidly. This wasn't just a fluke, this was a potential powder keg. If the wrong people found this, if the wrong eyes laid claim to this discovery. Set a course for the anomaly, Thorn said, his voice low and resolute. I want the crew ready for whatever comes next. We're not here to investigate, we're here to protect. Hours later, the Vigilance hovered at the edge of the anomaly, the faint glow of the ancient fleet's remnants beginning to take shape on the radar. It was massive. The scale of it was beyond anything Thorn had ever seen. The ships, though long dormant, carried an aura of untold power. Their frames, cracked and worn by time, still pulsed with life. This was humanity's last breath, trapped in the void for an eternity. Captain, Erin said, her voice steady but tinged with awe, we're seeing hundreds of ships. Hundreds, Captain. I don't. Get us closer, Thorn interrupted, his voice unwavering. The tension on the bridge was palpable as they maneuvered the Vigilance through the wreckage, the sheer size of the ancient human fleet pressing in on them. The eerie silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the ship's hull. Sir, we're receiving another transmission, Erin said, her hands flying over the console. This one's directed at us. It's from the fleet. Thorn straightened, every muscle in his body tense. This wasn't supposed to happen. The fleet had been lost. If anyone had been in command, they would have been dead long ago. Put it through, he ordered, his voice tight. The speaker crackled to life, but this time the voice was clear, sharp, with authority that sent a chill down his spine. This is Captain Elias Thorn, commander of the United Earth Fleet. If you have received this message, then you know what happens next. Thorn's blood ran cold. His name. His own name, spoken by a voice long dead. Everyone, brace for impact, he murmured, gripping the railing as the reality of what was happening began to settle in. The past was no longer just a memory. It was alive. The Vigilance drifted through the ruins, its sensors stretched to the limit as the ship closed in on the heart of the forgotten fleet. The once grand warships, their massive hulls cracked and scarred by centuries of neglect, loomed in the darkness like ancient titans. Each ship pulsed with a faint glow, as if the fleet itself were slowly breathing again, awakening after its long dormancy. Captain Elias Thorn stood at the helm, watching the spectacle unfold before him. His knuckles whitened on the control panel, his mind racing through the implications. This was no coincidence. The Council had believed humanity extinct, its empire crushed beneath the weight of time. But the fleet, the very fleet he had been warned about in his youth, was still here. And worse, it was no relic, it was functional. Captain, we're getting strange readings from the fleet, Erin said, her voice tight with unease. Energy signatures are fluctuating. I'm seeing traces of power in systems that should be long dead. Thorn's lips pressed into a thin line. The fleet wasn't just a ghost, it was active, awakening like something hungry. He had to act, and fast. Prepare to maneuver, he ordered, turning away from the viewport. We need to keep a safe distance and figure out what the hell is going on here. The crew scrambled into action, each person moving with the precision honed by years of military training. The Vigilance adjusted its course, gliding around the perimeter of the fleet. Every ship, every piece of debris told a story, some tragic, others victorious, but they were all relics now. They shouldn't have been here. This sector had been abandoned for centuries. And yet, here they were, as if waiting. Captain, I'm detecting something else, Erin said, her voice even more strained. There's a transmission coming from the flagship. It's been dormant for centuries. But now it's active. Thorn's chest tightened. The flagship. He could feel the weight of the word, the burden it carried. The flagship was the heart of humanity's might, the symbol of their lost empire. If that ship was operational, put it through, Thorn ordered, his voice cool despite the turmoil inside him. The transmission buzzed to life, the static crackling before a voice emerged. It was old, ragged, as though it had been lying dormant for far too long. "This is Captain Elias Thorne of the United Earth Fleet. If you are hearing this, you have disturbed something that should have remained buried. If you seek to wake the past, you will pay the price." The words were a jolt to his system. His name. His exact name. Thorne's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure if the captain on that transmission was real, or some automated remnant of a long-dead fleet. But what chilled him more was the certainty in the voice. He knew. They all knew. Thorne's hand hovered over the comms panel. "Lieutenant Aaron, analyze that transmission. Is it coming from the flagship itself?" Aaron's fingers flew over her console, her eyes scanning the readings. "Yes, Captain. The source is confirmed. The flagship, it's alive, or at least its systems are. But that message, it doesn't make sense. It's too precise. Prepare the crew. We're boarding that ship," Thorne said, his voice unwavering. "We need answers, and we need them now." Moments later, the Vigilance was positioned above the flagship, its boarding pods ready. The bridge hummed with a quiet energy, every crew member poised for action. Aaron and Thorne exchanged a brief, tense look before the order was given. "Deploy boarding pods." The pods launched with a controlled rush, the hatches sealing as they hurtled toward the flagship. Thorne's pulse quickened. It had been years since he'd faced a true battle, years since he'd walked through the halls of a warship with the full weight of human responsibility pressing on his shoulders. But this felt different. This wasn't just about a fleet. This was about humanity itself, and the consequences of its legacy. Inside the flagship, the air was thick with the smell of old metal and decaying systems. The lights flickered dimly as Thorne's team moved through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The ship felt like a tomb, but it was far from silent. The hum of machinery, dormant but functional, thrummed under their feet. They were walking through the remains of an empire that had once stretched across the stars. "Captain," Aaron's voice crackled through his comms, "I'm reading life signs. Weak, but there's something alive on this ship." Thorne's heart skipped a beat. Weak life signs? What did that mean? They had all believed that humanity had fallen into extinction, their remnants scattered in the ashes of the war. But if this ship was still operating, there had to be more to the story. More than just ships. More than just machines. "Weapons ready," Thorne muttered, though he wasn't sure if they'd encounter anything hostile. This wasn't a battle. Not yet. The team moved deeper into the ship, passing through long, darkened hallways. Their flashlights illuminated forgotten relics of human design. Old terminals, cracked displays, weapons lockers long untouched. Every turn they took seemed to lead them further into the heart of a mystery, but they were no closer to understanding the truth. Finally, they reached the command center, the heart of the flagship. The doors opened with a low groan, revealing a dimly lit room. In the center, a massive chair sat, surrounded by rows of inactive consoles. The air felt heavy with history. It was a throne room for a lost king, and in the chair sat a figure. A man, no, not just a man. This was a remnant of humanity's power. The figure stirred, and Thorne's breath caught in his throat. The man's face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, but his posture was unmistakable. He was a commander, a leader. His uniform was torn, aged beyond recognition, but it still carried the weight of authority. "Who are you?" Thorne asked, his voice a whisper of disbelief. The man's eyes flickered open, locking onto Thorne. A slow smile crept across his lips, one filled with both sorrow and recognition. "I am Captain Elias Thorne," the man rasped, his voice raw, like he hadn't spoken in years. "And you are my heir." Thorne felt the ground shift beneath him. This man, this impossible man, this ghost of humanity's past, was more than just a survivor. He was the key. The answer was out there, somewhere in the ship's walls, in the forgotten systems that powered it. The mystery was just beginning. The command center of the flagship was eerily silent after Captain Elias Thorne's revelation. The man who sat before him was an impossible echo, a remnant of humanity's lost past, and the weight of it all pressed heavily on Thorn's chest. The figure in the command chair seemed too real, too alive for someone who should have died centuries ago. Yet, here he was, looking back at Thorn with eyes that held both recognition and something darker, something older. Thorn's voice broke the silence, his words coming out slower than he intended. You're me. You're me. The man, the Captain Elias Thorn of the flagship, nodded with a slow, almost imperceptible movement. His eyes gleamed, as though the years of solitude hadn't diminished the sharpness of his mind. Yes, Captain. I am you. Or rather, I was. But now I am what's left. Thorn swallowed, his heart pounding. What happened? The fleet was destroyed. The war. Earth. The war didn't destroy us, the older Thorn interrupted, his voice hoarse but tinged with an unsettling calm. The Council did. The Council believed humanity's empire had crumbled, forgotten by the stars, but they were wrong. The weight of those words sank in. The Council, the very galactic authority that had forced the human race into isolation, had written Earth off as a lost cause. But this ship, this fleet, proved them wrong. The thought that the Council had intentionally erased humanity's existence filled Thorn with a fury that burned hot and fast. Then what happened to Earth? Thorn demanded, his hands clenched into fists. Why didn't you return? Why didn't you? I couldn't. The older Thorn's voice cracked, the rawness of it betraying a depth of regret. The fleet was scattered. We were betrayed. When the war ended, Earth was no longer the Earth you knew. We were left behind, forgotten, sealed away by the very people we fought for. We were meant to die in silence, to fade away. Thorn's head spun. The weight of betrayal, of forgotten history, felt unbearable. The Earth he had been taught about, the Earth that had been a cradle of technological marvels and the birthplace of humanity's rise to power, was nothing but a dead world in the eyes of the galaxy. The true story had been buried beneath layers of lies. But we're still here, Thorn said, his voice barely above a whisper. If you're me, then why didn't the fleet fight back? Why did you disappear? The captain in front of him exhaled sharply, as if the memory itself was a burden he couldn't escape. We tried. We fought. But we were outnumbered, outclassed, and the galaxy had already moved on. We made a decision. To survive, to regroup, we had to retreat. And in doing so, we left Earth behind. We left the heart of our empire to rot. Thorn's mind reeled. You left Earth? You left everyone? The older Thorn's eyes darkened, and for the first time, a flicker of pain crossed his features. It wasn't a choice, Elias. It was a necessity. The fleet was too powerful, too dangerous to let fall into the hands of the Council or anyone else. We knew Earth would be targeted if we stayed. And so, we sealed it away. The remnants of humanity's glory, the legacy we carried, was buried, hidden in the deepest, darkest corners of the galaxy. No one could know what we had. Not until the time was right. Thorn stepped back, his mind churning. And now the fleet is back. But why? Why wake it? What's the point? The older Thorn's gaze sharpened. Because they're coming. The Council, the galactic powers, they've sensed the disturbance. They know the fleet is here. And this time, they won't ignore us. The fleet wasn't meant to stay hidden forever. It was meant to come back and reclaim what was lost. To remind the galaxy of what humanity is capable of. The weight of those words was suffocating. Thorn had thought the war was over, that humanity's influence in the galaxy was a thing of the past. But now, staring into the eyes of his older self, he realized that the conflict wasn't finished. It had only been dormant, and the storm was about to awaken. We can't let them have it, Thorn said, a fire igniting in his chest. We can't let the galaxy fall into their hands again. No, the older Thorn agreed, the steely resolve in his voice resonating with years of unspoken anger. We can't. But we can't fight it alone, either. The fleet's numbers are diminished, but it still carries enough firepower to decimate entire fleet. But we will need allies. We will need the humans scattered across the stars to rally to our side. Then we'll find them, Thorn said, his voice hardening. We'll find every last one and show the galaxy who we are. The older Thorn's eyes softened, as though seeing the fire in his younger self that had once fueled the rise of humanity's empire. That's the spirit. But it's not going to be easy. The galaxy has long forgotten the cost of underestimating humanity. But now they'll learn again. A long silence stretched between them as Thorn processed the weight of the task ahead. Rebuilding an empire wasn't something that happened overnight. It would take time, strategy, and above all, strength. But the first step had already been taken. The fleet had been awakened. And now, the galaxy would feel its presence. Thorn turned to the rest of his crew, who had been standing by, waiting for orders. The tension in the room was palpable, each member of the team aware of the gravity of what they had just uncovered. We need to make contact with the others, Thorn said, his voice now commanding. We need to find every human settlement still out there, no matter how small. We're going to unite them. And we're going to rebuild. Aaron, standing beside him, gave him a sharp nod. Understood, Captain. Thorn turned back to the older Thorn. You said there were others. The remnants of humanity. Where do we find them? The older Thorn stood slowly, his aged joints creaking with effort. He gestured to the star charts displayed across the walls of the command center. The map is here. It's been hidden in plain sight, but it's all a matter of where to look. The survivors are scattered across the galaxy, but they'll come to us when the time is right. Thorn's eyes locked onto the map, the coordinates flickering across the display. He knew what had to be done. The galaxy had no idea what it had just awoken. But soon they would. We're not the ghosts of Earth anymore, Thorn said, his voice steady. We're the reckoning. And with that, the final piece of the puzzle slid into place. The fleet was no longer dormant. Humanity's empire was no longer lost to history. It was coming back, and the galaxy would learn to fear the human race once more. The Vigilance lurched as its engines roared to life. Thorn stood at the command console, watching the ship's systems come online. The crew worked in tandem, the smoothness of their movements a reflection of years spent training together, of a shared purpose forged in the fires of war. Aaron was already at her post, scanning the incoming data from the Galactic network. The map of human settlements, dotted across the stars like scattered embers, was before her, each mark a potential ally or adversary. Captain, Aaron's voice broke through the hum of the bridge. I've identified several human outposts. Most are small, barely more than colonies, but they're still operational. It looks like the Council's stranglehold isn't as tight as they thought. Thorn nodded, his jaw clenched. We'll start with the nearest one. Prepare a transmission. We need to make contact with them and establish our position. Understood. Aaron's fingers flew over her console, and the screen blinked with the message she had prepared. It was direct, forceful, and clear, no room for misinterpretation. To the human colonies scattered across the stars, the United Earth Fleet has returned. We are no longer the remnants of a forgotten past. We are the future. Join us or stand in our way. The choice is yours. Thorn turned away from the screen, his gaze focused on the dark expanse of space outside the ship's viewport. Send it. A tense silence fell over the bridge as Aaron transmitted the message. The words were now out there, rippling through the vastness of the galaxy. Somewhere, someone would hear it. The message would either rally humanity to their cause, or it would bring the wrath of the galaxy crashing down upon them. There would be no middle ground. Minutes ticked by like hours. The crew waited, each of them aware of the gravity of the situation. The Vigilance was alone in this. They were the tip of the spear, the first wave of humanity's resurgence. If they failed here, everything would crumble before they could even rebuild. Then the signal came. A small, flickering transmission appeared on the screen, a rough image of a weathered man in a military uniform. His eyes were hard, but there was recognition in them, familiarity. He looked like someone who had seen too many battles, too much destruction. "This is Commander Jace of the outpost Arcadia," the man said, his voice steady but cautious. "I received your message, and if you're telling the truth, then we've got a lot to talk about." Thorn leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "We're telling the truth, Commander. The United Earth Fleet is alive and well. We've come to reclaim what's ours, and we need every human we can find to do it." There was a long pause as Jace studied the transmission, his eyes narrowing. "We've been keeping our heads down for a reason, Captain. The Council doesn't take kindly to threats, and they'll destroy everything you've got if you push them." "I know," Thorn said, his voice cold. "Which is why we need to stand together. The Council will fall, but only if we unite. Every ship, every soldier, every colony, they all matter." Jace's face softened just for a moment, before he nodded. "I've been waiting for a sign like this. But don't mistake this for an alliance. You'll have our support, but there are too many questions. Too many risks. You'd better be able to back up your words." "Understood. And we will," Thorn replied, his eyes steely. "Expect us in 3 hours. Be ready." The transmission cut off. The bridge was silent again, the weight of the promise heavy in the air. "We need to move fast," Thorn said, his tone commanding. "Get us to Arcadia. And prepare for potential resistance." "Yes, Captain," Aaron said, already coordinating with the crew. As the Vigilance cruised toward Arcadia, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that time was working against them. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, and the remnants of the human race had been scattered to the farthest corners of space. But now, a spark had been lit. It was only a matter of time before that spark turned into a blaze. 3 hours later, the Vigilance entered the Arcadia system. The small outpost was situated on the fringe of a dying star's orbit, a cold, desolate place. But it was home to the survivors, the outcasts who had kept their heads down, waiting for the galaxy to forget. "Captain," Aaron's voice rang out. "I'm reading multiple ships in orbit. They're human, but they're not the fleet. Looks like they've been living under the radar for a while." "Good," Thorn said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That's what we need. Get us in close. Let's make our presence known." The Vigilance descended toward the station, its sleek silhouette cutting through the void. As they approached, Thorn could see the other ships in orbit, small freighters, battered warships, and a few that were barely holding together. They were the last remnants of humanity's fight for survival, the ones who had refused to bow. "Activate the comms," Thorn ordered. "Let's make it clear who's in charge now." Aaron nodded, flipping the switch. The comms hummed to life, and Thorn's voice filled the void. "This is Captain Elias Thorn of the United Earth Fleet," he said, his voice carrying authority. "We are here to reclaim what's ours. Arcadia, you are no longer alone. Join us, or prepare to be swept aside." A tense silence followed, and for a moment, it seemed like nothing would happen. Then, the screen crackled to life again. Jace appeared, his face now serious. "Captain, I've made my decision," Jace said, his voice firm. "We'll support you. But you better have a plan. The Council will be coming for us." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "We're ready for them." The transmission ended, and Thorn turned to the crew. "Prepare for the Council's response. We won't be caught off guard." Within moments, the Vigilance's sensors blared an alarm. A massive fleet was emerging from hyperspace, its ships glinting in the darkness like sharks circling their prey. Thorn's heart raced as he saw the unmistakable insignia of the Galactic Council on their hulls. "Brace for impact," Thorn shouted, gripping the armrests of his chair as the ship's systems activated to full readiness. The Council had arrived. And this time, humanity wasn't hiding. The first strike was about to begin. The silence was deafening. The Vigilance shuddered as the Council's fleet materialized in front of them, a massive, menacing presence in the void of space. Every single ship bore the mark of an empire that had once been unchallenged, their sleek hulls reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The time for negotiation had passed. The Council had made its move, and now there was no turning back. Captain Thorn stood at the helm, eyes locked on the view screen, watching as the enemy ships spread across the sky like a vast, suffocating net. It was an overwhelming sight. The numbers were against them, but the fire in his chest told him that it didn't matter. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. "Report," he commanded, his voice steady despite the tension. Aaron's fingers flew over the console. "At least 30 ships in total, Captain. Mostly cruisers and destroyers, but there are a few larger ships in the mix. No sign of the flagship yet." "That's a relief," Thorn muttered. The Council flagship was a beast of a ship, capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single well-placed strike. Without it, they had a chance. But just a chance. He turned to his tactical officer, a hardened veteran named Kors. "What's the status of our defenses?" "Shields are holding at 80%, Captain," Kors replied, his voice tight with focus. "Weapons are online, but we're outnumbered. If they decide to engage all at once, we won't last long." Thorn nodded, grimacing. "Then we need to make them hesitate. Aaron, open a channel to the fleet." "On it," she said, her fingers tapping quickly. A moment later, the fleet's comms were live. "You're clear, Captain." Thorn took a deep breath, stepping forward to the command station. "This is Captain Elias Thorn of the United Earth Fleet," he said, his voice cutting through the static. "The Council thought we were gone. They thought we were broken. You will soon learn that we are neither. We will not bow to your tyranny. Prepare yourselves for a fight." The screen crackled briefly before a stern face appeared, an alien officer whose golden skin and alien features were unmistakable. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his voice dripped with contempt. "Captain Thorn, how quaint," the officer said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You speak of defiance, but your fleet is already outmatched. You think your vigilance can stand against the might of the Galactic Council? You will be crushed, like the rest of your kind." Thorn held his ground, meeting the officer's gaze. "If you think I'm bluffing, then come closer. You'll see what humanity is capable of." The officer's expression darkened. "So be it. Prepare to die, human." The transmission cut off, and the bridge erupted into action. "Weapons on standby," Kors called. "Shields are holding, but we're surrounded. They're preparing to engage." "Fire the first shot," Thorn ordered. "Let's show them what happens when they underestimate humanity." The Vigilance's weapons hummed to life, and a brilliant stream of energy erupted from the ship's cannons, striking one of the nearest destroyers. The ship shuddered, the energy of the blast tearing through its shields and rupturing its hull. Sparks and flames exploded across its surface, and it began to list, drifting helplessly in space. "Direct hit," Aaron shouted, a grin forming on her face. "We've got their attention." The Council fleet responded almost instantly. The surrounding ships opened fire, their energy weapons streaking across space toward the Vigilance. The ship rocked under the barrage, but the shields held, flickering but not failing. Thorn gripped the armrest of his seat, his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding outside. "Return fire. All weapons!" Thorn barked. "Take down as many as we can before they regroup." The Vigilance fired again, its weapons pounding into another cruiser. This time, the shot didn't just damage, it obliterated the target. The cruiser broke apart, its pieces scattering in every direction as the energy blast tore it to pieces. But the victory was short-lived, as the remaining Council ships closed in, their weapons firing relentlessly. "Incoming fire!" Kors shouted. "Shields down to 60%. We can't keep this up much longer." "Then we'll make them pay," Thorn growled. "Aaron, activate the fleet's jump drive. Get us out of here." "Jump drive online," Erin replied, her fingers dancing over the controls. "But the fleet's not going to make it in time. We need to make a run for it." Thorn's mind raced. If they retreated now, they would only prove the Council's point. They'd be seen as weak, unable to stand up to the overwhelming force. No, this wasn't just about survival. This was about proving humanity's strength. "Forget the jump drive," Thorn said, his voice low and determined. "Prepare for a full assault. We're going to break through their lines." Kors blinked, looking at him as if he'd lost his mind. "Captain, that's suicide. If we go in, we're—" "Just do it," Thorn interrupted, his voice a growl. "We fight or we die trying." The crew exchanged looks of disbelief, but they all understood. There was no turning back. They were human, and humans didn't surrender. The Vigilance lurched forward, pushing through the barrage of enemy fire. The bridge crew worked with frantic speed, coordinating every maneuver, every strike, every shot. The ship's weapons fired in perfect sync, tearing into the Council's ships with deadly accuracy. "We're breaking through," Erin yelled, her voice triumphant. "We're punching a hole in their lines." Thorn's grip on the console tightened. "We won't stop until we've made them regret every second they spent thinking we were weak. Keep pushing." The Vigilance accelerated, breaking through the enemy's defensive perimeter. Explosions lit up the void, filling space with fire and debris as the Council ships fell one by one. The human fleet, small but fierce, followed suit, joining the fray. But Thorn knew they couldn't keep this up forever. They had to make this count. "Erin," he called, "send the message. Let them know who we are." Erin nodded, her fingers moving swiftly over the console. A transmission went out, the message clear and simple. "We are the United Earth Fleet. We are humanity. And we will never be silenced." The message echoed across the galaxy, a defiant roar that would resonate through the stars. The Council had underestimated humanity. And now, the reckoning had begun. The fight was far from over. But for the first time in centuries, humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly free. And no force, no empire, could stop them now.